Hi everyone, I am Suzi Green. I am the chair of Women in Planning South Midlands and welcome to this Women in Planning webinar looking at virtual panel discussion, probably more appropriate, looking at different career paths through planning. So I'm going to now hand over to the chair of this session. You'll see me again a little bit later on during the Q&A. So I'm handing over to Laura Webster. Laura is the Strategic Planning Manager for Planning Delivery at Central Bedfordshire Council. She is a member of the South Midlands Committee and she was also recently elected to the MRTPI General Assembly. So congratulations from me on that, Laura. So I will now pass the lead on this all over to Laura and I hope everyone enjoys.
Thank you, Suzi, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. So the session today is going to be me asking the panel a series of questions so we can find out a bit more about them, their career paths to date, and hopefully it will be an interesting discussion. You'll pick up some useful tips and some insights into their planning careers. We've allowed time for a Q&A at the end, and you can use the chat function during this session if you want to put any questions there. Suzi will be monitoring that during the session, and then we'll help sort of ask some of the questions at the end. We can put them to our panel. There's an opportunity for you could ask them yourself as well if we unmute you. So I think that's about it. That's a setup, and so let's get started and find out a bit more about our panel. So the first question, or thing I'm going to ask them to do, is I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Just a very brief summary of their planning career to date, how they got into planning, and if they weren't doing planning, what they think they might be doing or would they like to be doing. So I think we'll start with Jennifer, please.
Hello, thanks Laura. My name's Jennifer Smith. I am the managing partner at Smith Jenkins. We're a town planning consultancy based in Milton, Keynes. I went to university and studied town planning, so I have a degree in town planning and a postgraduate diploma in town planning as well. I was very lucky. I was one of the last years of to go to university who were funded for their university courses, and very sensibly as an 18-year-old I decided to go to university for 5 years and do a combined course, a sort of fat sandwich course. During the course of that sandwich I had a year's placement at a planning consultancy based here in Milton Keynes, who very kindly sponsored me through my final year at university, which then meant that I had a job to leave university to afterwards. I've always worked in the private sector. I've never worked in the public sector as a town planner, and if I wasn't a planner, what do I think I might be doing? It's a very difficult question, because I think that if you're a planner, it's kind of in your core and in your being, and it really takes over your life. So if I wasn't a planner, I'd probably be, I don't know, a travel agent, an adventure kind of consultant, maybe, travelling the world. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I always think it's an interesting question. You find out a bit about people, so travel's obviously one of yours. Right, I think we'll go to Carolyn next, please.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Barnes and I'm one of the senior planners in the planning policy team at Bedford Borough Council. And I too was fortunate that I was able to come into planning by the route of studying full-time, and I started out doing the very traditional geography degree, and then I did a postgraduate planning qualification, and also feel very fortunate to have been able to do that full-time as well. I started with Bedford Borough as a graduate, and was again at the time was fortunate that it was a career grade post, so I was able to progress into the senior planner role from there. So I have seen now, I think I've almost lost count, but I think on my 4th cycle of local plans, so local planning has been the thing which I have been doing throughout my career. In terms of what might I do if I wasn't a planner, the thing that I really enjoy is art. So I guess I might like to have studied art history and maybe gone into arts administration or curating or something like that. So that would be something that would attract me outside of planning.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Jennie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello everyone, I'm Jennie Selley. I'm Head of Planning Delivery at Central Bedfordshire Council, so that might make you realise that I'm Laura's boss. So I came into planning through, I suppose, what's been described as the traditional route, did a geography degree. I don't remember planning ever being sort of mentioned as a potential career to me. But when I was doing my degree, we did a module in town planning, and we had quite a fun day trip to Barnstaple planning department where I heard all about it and I thought, yeah, that's the career for me. I've always worked in development management and I've mainly got a local authority background. So I've worked for various authorities, Aylesbury Vale, Oxford City Council, Milton Keynes, and obviously now Central Bedfordshire. So I suppose you could say I'm sort of gradually working my way along the arc. The exceptions being when I spent time working for Milton Keynes Partnership, which was a local delivery vehicle, a Labour government initiative to sort of speed up delivery. And that was for dealing with the urban expansion areas on the edges of Milton Keynes. And that was hosted by, it was English Partnerships to start with, became Homes and Communities Agency, and obviously it's now Homes England. So I joined Central Bedfordshire in 2012 as Major Applications Manager, because that's where my sort of main expertise came from with Milton Keynes Partnership. And I was promoted to Head of Service in 2017 and been there since. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennie. I can say your name properly, I should know that. And then last but not least, Ellie. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and hello everyone, and my name is Ellie Gale. I am Strategic Land and Planning Manager at Wimpey. I have been there nearly 3 years now. I came into planning somewhat less conventionally to the others. I actually left school at 18 after my A-levels and went on to work in a very well-known high street chemist as a dispenser before later sort of seeing an advert when I was around 20 for a job in admin. Actually happened to be planning admin at Milton Keynes Council. So that is essentially where I learnt my trade and cut my teeth. I worked my way up through the admin section, and unfortunately at that time I was the year it changed in terms of funding. So there was no ability for any apprenticeships to fulfil sort of the route normally through planning. And so I decided to self-fund. Having supported myself for 5 years, I was able to get a grant. I went and did a geography degree at Manchester and worked during that time in local authority. I've done consultancy as well, and I've worked for a private retirement developer, and I've also worked for an affordable housing provider before my current role now. So you could say I've probably got a bit of a unique perspective because I've been in all sort of chairs, as it were. I did start out in DM, but as my career has obviously progressed, I've done everything, including local plans, promotion. What would I do if I weren't a planner? That's a hard question because apparently my A-level geography coursework was actually land use planning. So I think I was always destined to be a planner, as the other panellists have said. I think because of my like of the countryside and equestrian and dog pursuits, I'd probably be a farmer if I could and I could afford it. Thank you, Laura.
Great, thanks all. Yes, that's really interesting. Thanks for your introductions, and obviously we've got a good variety of backgrounds and sectors on the panel today, so that hopefully should be interesting. So that sort of leads me to trying to find out a little bit more about your current roles, and I'd like to ask, what do you most enjoy about your current role? and whether there's any particularly interesting projects you're working on at the moment that you'd like to share with us. So we'll start with Jennifer, please.
Yeah, so I'm managing partner at Smith Jenkins, which is a consultancy that I founded in 2012, and we, in terms of what I enjoy most about my current role, I think it's probably the nature of the problem solving that we have to do on behalf of clients. I always say that in the role that you do as a consultant, you are sort of 50% town planner and 50% counsellor, because a lot of people come to us to solve their problems. And there are a lot of people that only have a one-time engagement with the planning system. They're not regular developers. They don't work for Taylor Wimpey. It's not their bread and butter. And therefore it's our role to try and navigate the planning system for them. And I find that as something that is really satisfying, especially where people come to us with quite often quite unique problems as well. It may be somebody who has a disability, who needs a house on a single level, and they've bought a plot of land in the countryside. And sometimes they have unrealistic expectations because they think that they own a piece of land that they can do what they want to do it. So you're managing the process and you're trying to achieve something for them at the end. One of my most favourite projects, which is one which I really have taken to heart, I suppose, and I did relatively early on when I established Smith Jenkins, was to work for an individual who was living in a mouldy caravan on a piece of farmland in Daventry District Council, who had been the subject of some really horrific domestic violence, which was part of the case that we put forward to the local authority as to why she needed a house on the piece of land that she was on. She wrote a personal statement, and I sat at my desk and cried, and I sent it to the planning officer, and I think he cried as well, but we got permission for her house, and I was so pleased for her. I'm still pleased now, 6 years on. I went to see her about 3 months ago and got a tour around this amazing house and this amazing site that she's created. And I think that it's those moments of real sort of joy and satisfaction that really bring job satisfaction to our role. And they're the ones that I think make you keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think that's a really interesting point about planning, and it can be quite an emotive issue sometimes, and it's obviously quite personal to either people making applications or trying to do development or people who live nearby. So thanks for that. If we move on to Carolyn now, please.
Thank you. So I think the things that I really enjoy, as Jennifer's been saying, I really enjoy the problem solving side of our profession, and I also really enjoy collaborating with others. And so I think that part of my role, as I've said, is to do with local plans, and I often deal with the strategic side of that. So I enjoy seeing the big picture, and I hope helping to map out some solutions which ultimately are those things that we need to have in place, so that you've got a foundation which will ultimately enable as many people as possible to enjoy more sustainable options for the way that we live. So I guess that is something that is a core part of what perhaps I've been doing. And also on the strategic side, I've also been enjoying recently, there's been, some of you here will have been involved in it, but there's been a wider collaboration with the planning authorities in the wider southeast, and that's centred around the development of the London plan. So I've really enjoyed being part of that really, really big picture, and at a time when all the traditional strategic planning frameworks have fallen away, it has been satisfying to be able to collaborate with others and try to do the best that we can to keep that conversation open and keep the debate going about what we need for the wider southeast as a whole. I've also done quite a lot of appeals recently, and in terms of being asked about what we enjoy, then I think appeals are definitely in that type 2 fun category. So they're the kind of things that you enjoy afterwards, with a sense of achievement of having met the deadline and made it through that really challenging process. And finally, one other thing I'm enjoying at the moment is working with consultants on development briefs. It's great to be involved in the local plan side, but I really enjoy having the opportunity to get involved in the stuff that's going to lead into the implementation of that. And I've really enjoyed working with consultants who are looking at developing design codes for sites that were allocated in the local plan. And obviously design codes is very very current topic, and it's been great to get involved in that recently. That's probably enough from me.
That's great, thank you. Sounds like you're busy. It's really interesting to hear about the bigger picture stuff and collaborating with the other authorities, and especially on the London plan as well. Great stuff. Jennie, please.
Thanks, Laura. So yeah, I agree with everything that's been said about you know, what's enjoyable with planning. I also love the problem solving side of things, the sort of making things happen. But I also really enjoy the variety, and I've always had that throughout my career. In development management, I've always found that, you know, no 1 hour is ever the same, let alone one day. So many different types of applications to deal with, different customers, be that members, you know, first time applicants, you know, the volume house builders. So yeah, loads of variety there, and that's kind of sort of exacerbated really with my current role, because my service area covers sort of a wide variety of aspects of development management. So I have an enforcement team who report to me now, and then also technical consultees, so all of that technical expertise that goes into dealing with planning applications. So yeah, definitely loads of variety in my job, and I really love that. I suppose one of the biggest challenges, but I have enjoyed it, is that shift from sort of management to leadership. There's a real difference there actually, from being a team leader to being a head of service. There's that sort of realisation that the buck stops with you. You know, a customer often won't get the answer they want to hear, so they come to you for that sort of final say really. So it's just having that confidence, and that's something I've really learned in doing that. Budget management, I have to say, has also been a real steep learning curve for me, but now I've really got to grips with that. I'm no longer afraid of spreadsheets, although there's the odd one that does scare me. You know, that's been really good to learn about. I think the project I'm sort of proudest of is probably the academy that we set up in 2017. So that's an academy where we take in planning trainees every year. It does include other disciplines as well, so we've got like SUDS, highways trainees, building control, and effectively that was sort of to help solve recruitment problems we had, you know, shortages in the industry. And it's working really well. It's really helped us to backfill a lot of internal vacancies. We've seen, you know, progression. So I wouldn't say it was my idea originally, but, you know, I've really sort of helped to make it happen. We've had national recognition for it, and you know, we're looking to expand in future to sort of potentially help other authorities. So yeah, really proud of that one.
Thanks, Jennie. Yeah, obviously, because I work with you, I can vouch for the fact that you get such a variety across central Bedfordshire, and I can also vouch for how busy you are. You've got quite a big department. Thank you very much. And we'll just finally, Ellie, please.
Thank you, Laura. That's really interesting to hear what everyone else has to say, especially really encouraging to hear what Jennie's just said. And I'll use this opportunity to tip my hat to you. It sounds fantastic. I certainly would have appreciated that back in the day for myself. The variety with what I do, so my role is very different because it's not only planning, it's land as well. So part of my master's was actually dual accredited. Well, the whole of my master's was dual accredited. So that's something that I get to do is do the land searching and land buying sort of side of things. So looking out new opportunities, identifying them, taking through the land negotiation process, which isn't dissimilar to a Section 106 negotiation process, and then obviously checking the viability of it and progressing forward in that sense. So I have probably quite a rounded role. So once it's then taken from the land identification stage, taking it through the promotion and hopefully the allocation, and then a subsequent planning application. So it's a lot longer in that process. When we identify a strategic site, we're talking about a green field that has absolutely no planning prospects or prevalence at that particular time. So some of the projects that I'm currently working on have been in the portfolio for sometimes 10 to 20 years. That's not uncommon. So that's really actually quite interesting and gives quite a variety. The most interesting of all is when you get a site that comes forward slightly earlier, and it's one that potentially you've sort of done those negotiations on, and then you take it through the allocation process. As a planner, that's something that sort of motivates me. I want to make a difference, and I want to be proud of what we as a company, but also ourselves through the planning system, can deliver.
Great, thank you, Ellie. I think that's really interesting. We've got, I think it's quite clear that problem solving and a variety of work is a common theme across all of your planning careers. So that's great. So I thought we'd delve down now into a bit about thinking of other people maybe looking to embark on a planning career, or they're looking to move around. So the question is, do you have any advice for anybody starting a planning career or changing jobs within a planning career, and how you may make yourself stand out in potentially a more difficult market? We'll start with Jennie this time, please.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I think certainly for local authorities, there's obviously still plenty of opportunities out there at the moment. But I think just to probably say that local authorities are, they're already going through a tough time, and there's going to have to be a lot of obviously tightening of belts over the next few years. So I think those opportunities may sort of narrow. But obviously on the other side of things, you've got the white paper, which I think is, presenting potentially huge opportunities for planners in local authority. And that will be a real game changer in terms of the sort of skills required. So it's really obviously talking about much more of a shift towards the local plan stages. I think urban design experience is going to be really key in that. So I definitely sort of encourage, anyone looking at their careers to, really think about urban design experience. Obviously there's, a lot of talk in the white paper, and there has been for some time about, really sort of upping the game in terms of quality of developments. And that's certainly something we're looking for as a council. So yeah, that urban design experience I think is really key. In terms of sort of candidate CVs, and I've certainly done my fair share of recruitment over the last few years, I am really attracted by sort of candidates who've got that mix of public and private sector experience. I mean, it's not the be all and end all, but I just think it gives you those different perspectives. Someone with the private sector experience, you can really see things from the customer point of view, understand why actually it's not acceptable not to return the calls and pick up the phone and that sort of thing. But then equally, local authority experience, that gives you exposure to members, the political side of it. So, I'd really encourage people to try and get that mix of experience if you can. I appreciate it's not always possible. I suppose just specifically on CVs, there's the classic sort of keep it brief and keep it succinct, but also if you're talking about a project, don't just sort of tell me that you were involved in it. I really want to know how you were involved. What was your role? What was it that you did that made a difference to that project? And that for me sort of really stands out with candidates. So good luck anyone out there who's thinking about, you know, moving on in their career, but hopefully that might help.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about the mix of public and private experience. I think you learn so much from each side, don't you? Jennifer.
I think I would agree with what Jenny said in terms of, you know, we see lots of CVs. Getting your CV right, even if it's been to a recruitment consultant, it quite often comes to us and it's full of spelling mistakes, and it's really getting really simple things in a CV right that's important. I want to see, when I read a CV, that you've got great experience, but you're actually a real person as well, because from a private sector point of view, it's really important that you can do your job well, but it's also really important you're going to fit in with our team and work really well with our team. So, you know, having spelling mistakes, getting the foundations right, I think is really important in planning. You know, whenever we're doing anything, doing your due diligence on anything, doing your background research is always really important, because everything that you do really builds from those real basic things. Same with a CV as well. I want to see what your interests are outside of work. Yes, a broad range of experience is good, but actually if you're just starting out in a planning career, I want to see what those sort of transferable skills are that you may have done from a previous work experience. Getting work experience is really good, but I appreciate it's actually really hard, especially in COVID as well, because, you know, the majority of us aren't in the office. So the way that you would learn is by osmosis. It's sitting next to somebody, it's absorbing what that person is teaching you. But I think some of the key skills to show on a CV are that, you know, that you're organised, that you've potentially got negotiation skills, Jenny's customer service skills. I think if you're in the private sector or the public sector or third sector, you know, being able to show that you know how to deal with people, because people are a really key part of the planning system. You know, it's a lot about negotiation, and therefore so showing that you're sociable as well, actually, that you can hold a conversation, you can finish a conversation off, that you can ask pertinent questions. So if you're just starting out, you're not going to be able to show reams and reams of experience, but it's those other things, and it's a lot of soft skills, I think, make a really good planner. Your core planning knowledge is really good, but it's those soft skills that make really good planners.
That's great, thank you. Some really good tips there. We'll move on to Carolyn, please.
Yeah, so I think building on what the others have said already, I agree that certainly having a relevant degree, of course, is hugely helpful, but I don't personally believe it's absolutely essential, and I've worked with many people who've come into planning without doing that, and as the others have said, it's that ability to have those well-rounded set of skills that can really mark you out. And I think some of the things that I jotted down were, I think as planners, what we can offer in terms of bringing to a collaborative exercise is that we can show that we've got those rigorous and rational thinking abilities. And at the heart of any role in planning, I think you've got to be able to make a case or justify a decision, and you've got to be able to put that across in a written or verbal form. And I think if you can master that, then I think that you can turn your hand to an awful lot of the kind of work that we do in planning. And I think as planners, what we can also offer and what we want to build is this ability to be strategic thinkers. And I'm sure many of us have noticed it's only when we go outside of our planning, immediate planning teams, that we realise that the strategic thinking that we can do can really bring something that not all other disciplines have. And as the others have said, I think it's really important that you're able to come and be part of a team. My experience is in local government. We've been very, very stretched for a very, very long time, and in order to keep going, I think being able to muck in and turn your hand to what needs to be done can be absolutely invaluable to the kind of teams that we have. And I agree as well when it comes to CVs or applying for jobs in local government, the process does tend to be slightly more structured. But I think the most important word, as has been said, is about demonstrating things. It's being able to say how you did something. And I think that is a really, really good thing to focus on.
Fantastic, thank you. And we'll move to Ellie, please.
Thank you, Laura. Again, really good points that the other panelists are all making there. I won't say any more about CVs. I think that's actually been covered by Jennie and Jennifer really well. What I would maybe suggest is something that might be slightly different, and it picks up on something that I learned at Taylor Wimpey, and it's the graduate scheme that we offer. So we have various different graduate schemes available, and those graduates then get the opportunity to move around our business for 2 years, and they get to sample construction, so going actually out on site for an X period of time, doing commercial jobs, then working through land, etc., etc. And what that does, that gives them the overall breadth of knowledge of how the business actually works, so that when they come back 2 years later to the role that they eventually will sort of have, inherit, not really the right word, but they have a better grounding and understanding. Yes, you can do that in local government, but that's more through sort of secondments and acting up. That isn't sort of necessarily available in the private sector. You take on extra responsibilities as a way of demonstrating that you are more capable, and then as and when a role sort of exists, you are then able to sort of move into it, hopefully through that demonstration. I would massively be advocating to anyone out there looking to move on and move up, do whatever you can to make yourself more sort of attractive by getting as much experience and that breadth as you can at any one time.
Great, thank you very much. Some really good points there. Thanks all. So I just wanted to next touch upon one of the RTPI's commitments to improve equality and diversity and inclusivity across the profession, so we can better serve, the communities that we work in. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on how you think gender equality and diversity has changed over your career, and maybe in some of the roles you have worked in. Can I start with Jennifer, please?
Thank you. I have been working in the private sector for 20 years now, and when I first started work, I think I've had several stints in private sector consultancies where I've been the only female professional member of staff, which actually doesn't bother me at all. I found it quite easy to work in that environment. I've never had any issues working in that kind of environment. I've actually found some of the worst people to work with have been women in terms of bullying that I've received in the workplace, rather than from any male colleagues. But I have a gender diversity issue in my office in that I employ 9 women and 3 men. So we have what you might call what might typically be a reverse issue, to the one that the RTPI are trying to tackle. But I run my own consultancy, and I set up a consultancy on the basis of the way that I wanted it to run. I'm a parent, I'm a working mum, and a lot of the people that work for me are also working parents, both mothers and fathers. And actually we have a very equal way of approaching this. Everybody has an opportunity for flexible working. I've always taken the approach that if I want to go to sports day and watch my children play sports, then everybody else should be able to do that as well. And but it's a very different way of organising things, and we probably have a very untraditional way of doing that because it comes from me, and it stems, I guess, from the leadership that's within our organisation. And I know from my experience from working elsewhere, it's very much the leader in an organisation that will drive the culture that leads to diversity, equality, inclusivity. And it's probably the leaders in organisations that need to be targeted really to ensure that this balance is achieved across the industry that everybody's looking for.
Thank you, Jennifer. Carolyn, what are your views on this and how things have changed maybe?
Yeah, so my experiences in local government, and things certainly have changed over time. One anecdote that I thought I could mention was that when I first started, the head of service had a secretary, and they were often women, but that secretary was approaching retirement, but she could remember a time when she always called her head of service Mr. And so that just sticks in my mind as something that shows how times have changed and how things have moved on. And certainly in local government, which was once a much more traditional kind of place to work, and things have changed very much there. I think also just trying to look at the figures. I think I'm fortunate that the department that I'm in at the moment, we do have a good balance of men and women, and we have a good balance of men and women right across the department and through into the management levels. I think when I started, probably 70 to 80% of the department were men, and I would say that we're roughly I would say we're roughly almost equal, 50-50 now. So I think that in the place where I am, we do have a really a good balance, and that is very positive. And I think the other thing to mention is, I think at this time all of us everywhere are wanting to be aware of how we can think about making our workplaces more diverse. And at the present time, I think we've only got only one person who's from a BAME group. So there is definitely more work to be done on that, and I think that we all need to especially think about unconscious bias, and I think that that's an area where I think we can all learn a lot. And the story I've that explained that to me a lot was a story about someone who was working in a big corporate in London. It was in a big office, and there was a lot of security on the way in and such like. And there was a guy working there, and he was in a fairly high level position, but he found that as he was walking around the building, a lot of people would come up to him and they would hold up their Enterpass, their security card. And why was that? It was because he was black, and people thought he was the security guard. And it's those kind of examples of unconscious bias that I think we all need to be thinking about at this time, and how we can learn and progress through that.
Absolutely, thank you. Ellie, did you have any thoughts on this?
I would agree that yes, there is quite a lot of inequality in terms of representation across our sector, whilst it is improving all the time. And there are more women in much sort of more board roles and higher level sort of positions. The middle management sort of levels still very much are dominated by the males, but that is changing. I think the private sector definitely is still a little bit behind, but there's a huge sort of things that they're trying to do, lots of different ranges of techniques and employment drives that they're working on at the moment to try and change things. What I think is probably the most shocking is that still sort of in today's day, if you're a consultant, and I'm sure Jennifer will sort of back me up on this, sometimes it can actually come from your clients, that bias, and where they would prefer the advice to come from somebody else. And there has been occasions where I've had those sorts of meetings and had to have male representation when it was my project, simply because that was the way that the client was. It's something that is still changing, and I would sort of say I hope that nobody out there is disheartened if it does happen. It is on the decrease, but just to let you know, you're not alone, because when it happened to me, I thought I was, because there wasn't sort of the Women in Planning network at that time, and I have to say it did affect my confidence. Please don't let it do that.
Thank you, Ellie. And finally, Jennie, do you have anything to add?
I suppose just to add to what Ellie just said, I think on the other sort of foot, it's really important as well to raise these things when they happen. If you've seen it happening, you know, be the person to shout out about that and, you know, raise it with your manager, or that's really important. And I think that's where we have probably seen a change over time. I mean, like Carolyn, I have seen things change in local government, mainly around that sort of middle management, senior management. You know, when I first started, you didn't have female managers, let alone heads of service. So that has really changed. I suppose just to finish on a sort of positive note, I think with our academy, whilst we've been looking to take in trainees with a degree background, doesn't have to be a planning related degree, we are sort of looking to sort of take in candidates earlier in their careers. So not those just coming straight out of university, but those you know, straight from college or straight from school. And I'm hopeful that will increase the diversity of candidates that we see. I think that could really help, actually. You know, it's getting that interest in planning earlier on in schools, when you probably may attract a more diverse mix of candidates. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jennie. I think that's a really good point about getting to people earlier about careers in planning, because at school it certainly wasn't something that was mentioned to me either. Right, thanks all for that. We're a little bit pushed for time, so if I can maybe ask the panel to keep their answers fairly brief on this last question, but not too brief, but fairly brief. I wanted to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've been given that you would maybe pass on to us? And doesn't necessarily have to be from somebody you worked with, but if you could just let us know who it was from as well. Start with Ellie, please.
Thanks, Laura. I think the best piece of advice that I was ever given was look before you leap. And most of you that know me will probably kind of laugh out loud at that, because sometimes I can be quite forthright with my thoughts and shoot from my gut. That's because I trust my gut instinct quite a lot. But sometimes, just depending on the customer, you need to just maybe take that 10 seconds just to digest it. That's the best piece of advice I've ever been given. It was by a former manager who's a great friend of mine. And I would wholeheartedly say to anyone coming into the profession, just take 10.
Fantastic advice, thank you. I like that. Right, Carolyn, please, what's your best piece of advice?
I think something that I would say is go to the edge. So whatever we might be, we can, as professions, we can get a little bit insular and inward looking, but I think going to the edge and go to the place where you get those interesting interactions. The thing that I really enjoy is working with people, be they lawyers or people who are urban designers or architects, and for me, I think that's where the creativity is and where a lot of the enjoyment is. So I would say seek out ways in which you can find those opportunities, and I think that for all of us, that whatever role you're in, there is a possibility to do that. So I think that's what's really enhanced what I do, seeing it as something that's being at the join with other disciplines and finding the creativity that comes out of that.
Great, thank you very much. And Jennie, best piece of advice, and who is it from?
Oh, so many to choose from, and yeah, great advice from the other panellists. It wasn't really a specific piece of advice, it was more a leading by example. I had a fantastic mentor when I worked at Milton Keynes Partnership, and I think just picking up on what Jennifer was saying before about keeping it human, she kept it fun as a manager. She just gave us those little glimpses of life outside work, and helped us to do sort of sociable things and just kept it light. And I really try and carry that on in my current role. For example, I did a quiz for my managers, just a fun thing, and I know, Laura, you're going to help me do another one. But yeah, just keep it fun, keep the human side of things, because you can have a really hard day sometimes. You have a really angry customer, things can really bog you down, so just remember there's life outside work.
Yeah, good advice, totally agree with that. And finally, Jennifer, please.
Thank you. It's great advice from everybody so far. It's amazingly diverse and interesting panel discussion. Somebody said to me once about making yourself invaluable. Make yourself invaluable in your role, so you become the go-to person. Have a niche, have a specialism, be a generalist, but have something that means that you're always invaluable in your organisation. And it doesn't have to be that you are the smartest planner or the most about the development management procedure or the Article 22A or whatever it happens to be. But whether you're the listener or you're the person that people go to because they've had a bad weekend, or it could be anything. But I think that's actually been a really good piece of advice about making yourself invaluable.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I think that's been really useful. But yeah, I did want to just leave a bit of time at the end for any questions from our audience. I know that Suzi has, because obviously I've been sharing this, has been keeping an eye on any questions coming in. So Suzi, did you have some particular questions that you think we should put to our panel?
Yes, so we have had 4 questions that have come in, and I've had a brief message to the person just to check that they're okay with asking it themselves. So the first question is from Melissa Bork, who is at Fisher German, who I know. So we're getting Mel unmuted now, and hopefully we'll be able to hear her voice soon. Let's see.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
First of all, thanks everyone for your really interesting contributions. It's been, I think, a really good discussion. My question was, what piece of advice would the panel give on how to successfully lead a team virtually, and how have the challenges differed to leading one in the usual office environment?
Great question, thank you, Melissa. Obviously it's a bit difficult because I'm not sitting right in front of you, but anybody who wants to come in on that from the panel? Go on, Jennie, let's go.
Happy to give it a go, because yeah, it's something I've absolutely had to get to grips with. So I think trust is really important. I think, you know, obviously you can't be there watching people in the office, and you know, you shouldn't really be doing that anyway. So just, you know, you've got to build that level of trust. But I think part of the way you do that is that you set really clear expectations as to, you know, what you need people to do for you. So that, you know, the classic objective setting, but, you know, not quite with such a hard edge to it, but just make sure people are really clear about what you want them to be doing. And then if you add that sort of element of trust to that, then I think you probably find that it can work, and it can work really well.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other panel members would like to add to that? Ellie, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really good question, Mel. Thank you. I come at it slightly differently and from a project team lead. So actually during COVID times, it's been much easier to set up meetings and to move projects along. So actually what we found is that productivity has shot through the roof. And that's mainly because we're not spending our time in cars travelling all over the place, going from meeting to meeting, where you could lose a week in travel. So now we're going from meeting to meeting, and that has its own issues because of how sort of tired naturally you become. But yeah, it's actually been quite refreshing. We've been able to talk and meet, and it's keeping costs down, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point about travel. Yeah, less time travelling. Any others, Jennifer or Carolyn? No.
Okay, right, in that case we will move on to our next question, which was from Joanna Pierce. Joanna, you should hopefully be being unmuted now, so do you want to ask your question?
Yes, please. Thanks. I think it's been really inspirational listening to the team talk about all their different career experiences, the speakers talking about it. I'm actually trying to change career, so I work as a comms consultant on property development at the moment, and I'm taking a MSc in planning, and I'd actually like to work in planning policy on the local authority side, I think, once I could finish that. And I wondered if the people who work, Carolyn and Jenny, have any advice on the kind of roles that you should be applying for, because that's not really clear to me, and also if they have any advice for mature candidates who don't necessarily have traditional experience, because my fear is almost that I might have too much other experience to be an attractive candidate.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, I think that's probably a good one for Jenny or Carolyn. So, Jenny, did you have something initially on that?
Because I've never worked in policy, I'll probably leave the side of that, the first part of the question, to Carolyn. But certainly in terms of, you know, being a mature candidate and all that experience, you know, don't think of that as a negative. You know, just think of that in a positive way, that all that experience you've got in your career. I mean, some of the things we've been talking about with the panel today about, you know, that experience of dealing with customers, just try and think how that's transferable. A lot of it will be transferable to planning, and, you know, the fact you've got that experience will be seen as a real plus for your CV. You know how to deal with people. You know how to, I mean, even really simple stuff like, you know how to work a photocopier. You know, we get graduates, seriously, we have graduates who, you know, great as they are, they just don't have that experience of working in an office. You've got that life experience, that work experience, so really play on that in your CV.
Thank you, Jenny. Carolyn?
Yes, I would agree that if you're coming into planning having done other things, then I'm quite sure that a lot of the skills that you already have will be really, really valuable. As I said before, I do think that the core skills make a huge difference in planning. And in terms of the kind of roles that might be available. I think most local authorities do still have a structure where you will have a planning policy team, and there will be either graduate posts or planning officer posts, which would be your natural target as ones to apply for. But I would also say don't be afraid of just looking what's out there and applying for posts, because we certainly do have in the department I work in members of staff who come in more junior roles. They do often move around the department and between sections. So I think if you can get your foot in the door, as it were, and you can show that you've got those skills, you'll be well placed to advance into other roles as they become available within a council.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I hope that answered your question, Joanna. Suzi, have we got any other? We've got a few more minutes for some more questions.
Yeah, so we have 2 more questions, and we're only going to put them each to a couple of the speakers just so that we don't overrun. Annabelle Laloe asked our next question. So Annabelle, over to you.
Hi there. So I just have a question about future plans. I've got no news to be sharing, but it's just career advice upon managing having a family and career aspirations, and any difficulties that any speakers have had regarding maternity, returning and moving up the ladder, really.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. I personally know that Jennie does have a family, so Jennie, are you able to maybe give a bit of advice on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the year I started my head of service role and my eldest was starting school, we were moving house. I was short of 2 managers, so that was a pretty tough year. So I can probably feel quite well qualified to answer this one, but I suppose it's possible is the main message. You can do it, and certainly with employers being much more flexible around these things. We've heard from one of the panel this morning about how they themselves encourage this within the workplace. But with the local authorities, for example, there's flexible working. We're seeing a lot more agile working, being able to work from home, and all these things really help to make it possible for you to do it. Saying that, it is hard work and it is sometimes a real juggling act, so just be prepared for that, but see it through. You can do it, I think, is the main message.
Thank you, Jennie. Probably got time for one more. Has anybody else on the panel got some response on that?
I'll come back if that's okay. Yeah. I actually do my job because I have children, which is slightly unique. I moved from a big corporate organisation to become a sole practitioner, simply because I was faced with a choice really about stopping planning. And as I said, most of us planners, I think if you cut us through the middle, we're like sticks of rock, it'll say planning in the middle, because we're passionate about what we do. And I was really faced with a choice of stopping work and doing nothing. I've got 3 children, or doing something a bit different. And I think that's one of the good things about the roles that we do, is that there's so much variety in our sector, is that there's lots of opportunities, and you don't have to just stay on one path. So it may be at the moment that you're working in the private sector, and that actually there will be an opportunity in the public sector which is more flexible and meets those needs. Take it, do it for a couple of years, and then go back to pursuing whatever your passion might be at that point in time, because you will gain skills from doing that. You will gain skills from transferring and from those changes that you make to fit your circumstances at a particular time in your life. My eldest child's now 13, and the time goes so fast when you have children. This is sort of a bit general parenting advice really, but that they are only little for a very short period of time, whereas you will have a working career of 40 plus years. Who knows when the retirement age will be when we get to that point in time, and so I think there are lots of opportunities that will present themselves to you, but that the profession is changing, world is becoming more flexible in terms of where we can work from. I think the critical thing is that when you go on maternity leave, or if you take a career break, is to stay up to date with what's going on in the industry. Make sure that you're reading planning resource, understanding what changes are coming out of government. At the moment, there are so many free seminars that you can take part in. Landmark Chambers are doing a lot. And it's making sure that your skill level remains the same, your knowledge level. It's a lot easier to practice planning when you're actually planning. If you step away and stop and then try and come back, I think it's a lot harder. So, but flex your life and make it work for you, because you will come back to where you are at the end of the process.
Fantastic, thank you, Jennifer. We're very short on time, but I think we're just going to squeeze in one more question before we wrap it up. So Suzi, have you got a question in mind?
Yeah, we're conscious that we are running over. What I'll try to do after this is, I'm conscious that we've got 2 other questions which after this one, and we'll circulate some answers around to everyone afterwards, just to make sure that it gets answered. So anyone else that does have a question, do put it in the chat. We will try and get an answer for you. I'm going to hand it over to our final question, which is going to be Helen Wyman. Helen, are you unmuted?
Yes, I think so. I just wanted to pick up, I think Jennifer mentioned earlier that most people learn through osmosis, and those really valuable conversations you have next to a colleague in the office. And as most of us will continue to work from home for the foreseeable, are there any tips on how you might access those kind of informal questions and conversations?
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, I think it's a very, very valid one for the time we're in at the moment. Who from our panel would like to answer that one?
I'll give it a go if that's all right,
yeah.
Laura.
Thank you.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think none of us are it's not sort of something that's new to any of us. This is probably the easiest way to describe it. We've all got somebody in our teams that we work with that would normally be exactly that, learning through osmosis, and indeed ourselves, because the moment we stop learning, we might as well give up and hang up our hats. What we are looking to do is actually sort of use days in the office to sort of necessarily shadow with more junior sort of members of staff, have more one-to-ones, make them much more frequent, but indeed have those members actually shadowing throughout the project life. So they should be involved in the Teams meetings, following the email traffic, be involved in sort of those regular sort of discussions. That's how we're dealing with it. I'm sure others have got suggestions too.
Thank you, Ellie. Any other suggestions from our panel? No? I think the one thing I'd say during this time is that we've used Microsoft Teams a lot for meetings, and personally I've found that really useful in keeping in touch, and actually in a way it's a little bit easier to track people down sometimes, because you sometimes look across a desk and they wouldn't be there, you think, oh well, I'll ask them later, but now you can just hit a button and they can't get away from you. So yeah, I found that really useful during this time to keep in touch with colleagues. Right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there because we've run over a little bit. So I'd like to say thank you for our panellists for joining us and taking the time. I hope people have enjoyed it and found it useful and interesting to listen to. So I might just also hand over to Suzi just to close. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and I know that I can speak for other people and say that's been so useful and been really interesting in hearing about all your different experiences, and I can speak for myself that I definitely want to coordinate a blog from you guys just to maybe talk through some of these things a bit more, so everyone keep an eye out for that. I'm going to convince everyone to make sure that happens. Make sure to give us feedback on Twitter or LinkedIn, you know, we really appreciate it. And we hope that you guys have enjoyed. So we're going to sign off now, and thanks so much for coming along.
Thank you.